I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may.
Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone and you're watching The Daily Question. Today's question of the day, Sargon and Patreon. Is this the mark of the beast and what can be done about it? Now, the reason I'm asking that question is because about a week or so back, Sargon of Akkad was kicked off of Patreon. He wakes up one morning and discovers that Patreon have deleted his Patreon account, and they've done this because of a word that he used, one word that he used on a YouTube channel, not his own, on another channel, someone else's channel, where he was invited to be part of a discussion, and he used a particular word, and they deemed that to be unacceptable, and so they just deleted, without any notification, deleted his Patreon account. Now, there's a real problem here, as you can imagine, and it's not really to do with that particular word. I personally wouldn't have used that word. He chose to. That was his choice. He gave a particular context, and he has explained why. For those who haven't watched his explanation videos, I will post links in the video description below so you can actually understand what's happened and his response to it. And I've got no reason to doubt his sincerity in giving the context for why he used that particular word. It's not something I would have done, but that's really irrelevant. The problem here is how Patreon have responded, and there's some really clear and glaring problems with what Patreon have done here. First of all, it's just totally arbitrary. Their terms of service do not give any justification for them doing this, and yet they've done it. So he signs on to a particular set of terms of service with Patreon, and then they just make up new rules that are outside of the terms of service. It's totally arbitrary. It is unjust. It's absolutely unjust. He wakes up one morning to discover that this is done. His income stream is effectively cut off, and there is no appeals process for him. There's no way for him to actually begin to put in place or to respond to the way he's been treated. There's no due process involved at all. It's overreach. You've got an organisation here in Patreon that is reaching well beyond its mandate. It has gone and looked at the conduct of one of their particular members outside of their terms of service, outside of their platform. And they have then decided to punish him for a word that he has used without even bothering to actually ascertain with him whether there's any context first. They've just punished him, and they've gone well beyond it. It's just overreach. They're going into places. They're effectively policing the internet now for that particular person. But that's not what they should be doing at all. And fourthly, and really I think this is the biggest problem of all, is that basically there's no integrity here and there's some very serious dishonesty. Jack Conte, the CEO of Patreon, specifically stated, and he did this on the Dave Rubin show, that you wouldn't be punished for things you did on other platforms, yet that's exactly what's happened here. He laid out what the principle was that they operate under for making these decisions, and Sargon does not actually fit under that definition, that particular principle that they are using. So either Jack Conte is lying and he's just saying one thing to the public and then doing another thing in private, which obviously lacks all integrity and is completely dishonest, or he doesn't actually understand how his corporation is even being run. He doesn't actually understand what's happening on the ground. Either way, this isn't good. Now, this is becoming more and more a feature of the internet, where big tech companies are punishing people, are restricting people, are even kicking them off their platforms, deplatforming them, because they engage in what the big tech companies deem to be wrong speak or wrong think. It's something that I've experienced on my own channel here. I know that, for example, if I post certain videos about certain topics, like, let's say, for example, abortion from a pro-life perspective, and for those who are not regular watchers of my channel, I don't swear on my videos. I don't say horrible, vicious things about people. I just charitably and civilly present views and engage in effectively discussion about these issues. And so I will find myself, though, if I talk about certain topics, abortion from a pro-life perspective is one of them, I will get the dreaded yellow strike, the limited state that your videos get put into, where effectively you can't earn much in the way of revenue from them. They're not seen as much, they're not viewed as much. And I can appeal that, but I know on certain topics, even on appeal, I'm told, no, your video is still not acceptable. I noticed around the time of the US midterms that the yellow striking actually seemed to peak to a higher level than what it usually was. So this is more and more of an issue, and it got me thinking about the mark of the beast. Now, for those of you who might not know what the mark of the beast is, if you're a regular watcher of horror movies, you'll know what the mark of the beast is. If you're a Christian person or you have any, even just a passing knowledge of Christianity in the Bible, you'll know what the mark of the beast is. But in the book of Revelation, or the book of the Apocalypse, which is the final book in the Bible, the Christian Bible, chapter 13, we read about this beast that comes forth, the great apocalypse, and this beast comes forth, and it's, let me read to you so you can actually understand exactly what I'm talking about. It says here, the beast causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. That is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. For those who are wondering what the context of that might be, the book of Revelation, the book of the Apocalypse, is written in a particularly cryptic way because it's written in a time of great persecution for those early Christians and the persecution they're experiencing at the hands of the Roman Empire. And so there is a certain cryptic nature to the way this particular passage is written. Now, the man they are referring to is none other than Nero, and what they are referring to is the fact that Nero, who believed himself to be a divine god, demanded that everyone make sacrifices to him. Basically, they worship him. And if you didn't worship Nero and you didn't get your little certificate saying that you had made sacrifices to Nero, then you couldn't buy, sell, or trade in the public square. You were excluded from the public square. I'm sure most of you can understand why now I thought about the mark of the beast when I thought about the way tech companies are acting, because effectively this is what's happening here. Unless you agree to get the mark of the beast, that is, you worship their gods, their ideological gods, you will be banished from the public square. And this is becoming more and more of a problem because the public square, these people aren't just private corporations, as some people try and defend them now, and they say, oh, they're just private corporations. So you're signing onto a private corporation. Well, no, that's not what's going on here now. They're not just private corporations who are in the public square. They now own the public square because the public square has now shifted primarily to the online space. And so what you've got now is these big tech companies who actually own, control, and govern. They operate a form of shadow governance over our society. They're unelected and they're unaccountable, and that is a real big problem. So something needs to happen about this. What can be done about this? Well, I would suggest there's two possible options. Number one, government regulations are imposed upon the big tech companies. Now, it seems to make sense to me that this would be the US government who do this because big tech is housed primarily in Silicon Valley. They are operating under the jurisdiction of the US government, so it makes sense for the US government to be the one who is actually imposing legislation upon those companies. First of all, there would need to be some clear laws about the fact that you could not kick someone off your platform simply because they say things that you don't like. You would actually have to show and give legitimate reasons for removal, which is the second point, that if you are going to remove someone from the platform, there would have to be legislation about when you could and when you couldn't actually do that. So there has to be a legitimate justification. And I would suggest if you've got people who are engaging in criminal enterprise, that would obviously be an acceptable reason to deplatform them. If you have got someone who it can actually be shown is causing legitimate harm, then that would be a reason to deplatform them. But hurt feelings, speech, political ideas you disagree with is not acceptable. Secondly, related to that, there needs to be a clear and very transparent process. So where the rules are actually laid out and you show exactly, there's got to be proper due process, why a person has been removed. And importantly, there needs to be, I think, legislated a complaints appeal process. So before a person is even removed, the service provider would actually have to tell them that this is the decision that they are about to undertake, and they have a chance to appeal at that stage. And if the appeal was not successful initially, they would then be deplatformed. And then they also have other appeal processes, but these are very transparent and very clearly spelled out to the person at the time of removal that they have open to them. I think there should also be a disputes body that is set up by the government, an independent authority that effectively acts as a watchdog, and where people, any person, whether they're a citizen or a bigger organisation who has been deplatformed, they can go to this watchdog, this complaints authority, and they can say, I believe that I have been unfairly treated, that they have violated these laws by removing me from their platform, and I would like you now to mount an investigation. And lastly, it would need to be mandated that these regulations are not just localised. So you can't just treat US citizens with a sense of fairness and justness and transparency when you're dealing with them, but then when you come to Australia, you can do whatever you like. No. In actual fact, this would be a condition or a stipulation of being housed in America, even though you might operate in other parts of the world. Now, option number 2, if you didn't want to go the way of government legislation, would be to have an Internet Bill of Rights that was established. And this would apply, I guess, all around the world, but of course that's going to be a lot more fraught. I'm not sure who exactly would govern such a Bill of Rights, who's responsible for ensuring that these big tech companies are actually towing the line. It seems to me that might be a more difficult way of doing things, but it would encompass, I think, those same things that government regulation would, and those requirements on those big tech companies to ensure that they are acting like service providers and not divinely appointed kings who will decide who can and cannot engage in public discussion. I think a really apt comparison in all of this is to compare big tech companies with telecommunications service providers, because I think this is how big tech companies should be viewed and how they should be operating. So for example, let's say your local telecommunications provider, your local phone company, you have a phone line with them and you use your telephone to organise people to gather together for an event in support of or protest about the minimum wage. You're part of a group that believes in minimum wage, and so you use your telephone to organise and get people together and share ideas about minimum wage. Your telephone company can't say, well, we're just going to kick you off our platform, we're going to deny you a telephone because we disagree and we think minimum wage is really destructive for society, we think it's a bad idea, and so we're not letting anyone on our service provider platform, we're not letting anyone be part of or use our service if they are actually actively out there encouraging people to stand up and to voice their opposition and to be favourable towards a minimum wage. Now, I think that's how big tech companies should be viewed, and that's the kind of hands-off transparency that they need to be operating under. Whether we like it or not, the public square is now online. And so what that means is that these big tech companies are now wielding a level of control over the public square that we really haven't seen in our recent history, and it's a problem. It shouldn't be this way. Now, even if you want to hide under the blanket of, oh, they're just a corporation, which, as I said, does not apply anymore because of the level of control and where they and what they control, the simple fact is that with this Patreon situation, they haven't even acted according to the basic ethical parameters that you would expect from a big corporation. When you sign on to terms of service, both parties are supposed to honour those terms of service, not act arbitrarily outside of them, and that hasn't happened in this case. Now, many of you have been asking me, well, Brendan, what about the fact that you're on Patreon? What does this mean going forward? Well, I am going to leave my Patreon account open for now because I know that some people still want to support me that way. I have also set up a Subscribestar account. However, at the moment, Subscribestar, because of some technical issues about processing payments, are not taking any new donations. So I've got to wait and see the next couple of weeks how that rolls out. And I also have a PayPal account set up as well, but I am currently looking into other options, and going forward I am hoping that there will be a stable alternative that can be offered so that those who feel, and I know some of you who've already done this, you have moved away from Patreon because of the way that they've conducted themselves, and I totally get this, and as I said, it's something that I'm currently working on myself at the moment. As per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comments section below, and if you like the content I'm creating and you'd like to see more of it, then please consider financially supporting the channel. The links for all of those options are in the video description below. That's right, I can hear my theme music too. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily Question.